Okay, we're good to go. Um, I thought the component display theory was actually pretty interesting. Like, I've never heard of it before, but like, it totally made sense to me the way that he explained the different ways, I guess, that we provide information and how different they are, but how beneficial each one can be, I guess.
Yeah, I really liked when he talked about using stories that teach the principle, because I feel that like when you have a personal story, people can relate to it and they can find a way to apply what you're actually teaching them. And that's why I think like Christ used a lot of parables, so that way the people could understand what he was trying to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even in like sacrament meetings, if someone uses like a personal story, even I can remember it better than someone just like giving out facts and stuff like that. It's if you can connect it to a real life experience, it's easier to remember.
Yeah.
It also is more interesting too.
Mm-hmm. I think it also, like as an instructor, it probably helps you relate more to people you're teaching because it kind of gives you more of like I don't know, it makes you seem more real, if that makes sense, instead of just somebody who's spitting out information. It like helps people relate to you on a personal basis rather than just like a teacher student.
That kind of just reminds me of some of the communications courses I've had to take with conflict management and things like that. Like when you're in an argument or you're faced with an issue, if you can make it relatable to the person that you're talking to, then all of a sudden their tone changes, they're listening, they actually want to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
I liked what he said about like trying to help the learner take the principles home with them. Um, like there's a lot of times that you can walk away from them like, oh, that's a great lesson, but you don't actually really apply it in your life or anything. So just kind of pushing the participants for like actions that are congruent with the principle. I thought that was really interesting. Kind of made me apply that in the lessons that we're going to be teaching our participants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that he talked about finding instructional balance, that there is a balance between how much we're talking versus how much the participant is talking, because they're probably going to learn a lot more if they're actually participating and they're speaking and they're asking questions than if we're just lecturing to them. Just like, we've been in classrooms where all the teacher does is just talk and it's really boring and you don't really enjoy, that class. So I think that we need to make sure that we find a balance and like asking really deep questions, not just yes or no questions, so that way they're really reflecting. And I think the first lesson is going to be maybe a little bit more difficult because we're still building that relationship. But hopefully, like in future lessons, hopefully it won't be awkward.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard. Oh,
No,
sorry,
go ahead.
go. Okay. I was just going to say, yeah, I think it's hard it's not necessarily hard to come up with deep questions, but I think it's hard to find deep questions that will strike a chord but are not going too far and crossing that boundary, especially as we get to know the participants and what they're wanting to learn. I think that's a fine line that we have to be careful of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting how he said, after asking questions, a skilled teacher responds to every answer. So even when it's not exactly what they're looking for, they still acknowledge that and try to expound on it, I guess, instead of just brushing it off because it didn't fit their mold of what they were trying to reach.
Mm-hmm.
How would you guys do that? Because personally, when I have an idea going and then someone throws something my way, I try to connect it, but it usually ends up being pretty awkward. What would you do for a good transition?
So I had a teaching class 2 semesters ago or whatever, and I had to teach with a partner. And it was a very interesting experience, and I learned that, like, things would just kind of get drifted off really easily into, like, a not where, like, our point end was, you know. So I kind of had to learn how to just kind of roll with it, but then find a way to bring it and tie it back into, like, the topic we're actually on, or, like, I don't know, because I try to think of, like, okay, I have less, and this is my goal. I have to make sure this is where I want to get in the lesson. And so I know that sometimes other things might get thrown in or whatever, but just being able to somehow bring that back. I don't know, it just kind of, if that makes any sense at all. Like, just try to find some way to relate it, or sometimes it's just like, oh, you know, that's a great thought, and I really like that, or whatever, and then, anyway, you know. But back to what what we're talking about, or what, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It makes more sense in my head than what I...
I guess also, I mean, this would be like a lot more work, but maybe like prepare scenarios of maybe if someone does ask a question, like if you are on a topic and is like just saying something, and then you're like, okay, what kind of questions could someone ask? And then maybe prepare that way, but that would be, you might not even have a question, but it could be similar to a question someone might ask. I don't know.
You can think about that. Try to make your questions, I don't know, when you just say, if you ask a question, it made me think, if you make sure you phrase your questions the right direction, then you kind of can lead them into where you want them to go. You know, like having too broad of a question might take you other places, but if you kind of narrow it down and have a question that's lead to what you're doing, that might help.
Yeah.
I guess it would also be easier if it was in like a workshop, you know, because then you could ask someone else. But since we're by ourselves, you know.
I think the most important thing is whatever their comment or question is, making sure that they feel validated in that you really, like, you address it and you talk about it. And then even if you can't tie it in, you know, kind of like Shay said, you know, address it and then just kind of be like, well, back to what we were talking about or something like that. But just making sure that they feel free to ask questions and to participate. So
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't ever want to, like, get mad at them, or, like, even kind of portray just like, yeah, that's not what I wanted, because then they don't want to participate anymore.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have anything else for Chapter 4?
I'm good.
So in Chapter 5, I liked where it said, like, the adult learner's experience is a great learning tool. And I think when I am learning something, I always try to apply it to something that's happened in my life, because then it sticks better. You know, I learn more about it and I learn how to actually apply it than just this, you know, this topic that seems out there for me because I don't have anywhere to actually apply it. So I mean, that's a great tip. as we teach these people, we try to, because obviously from our intake interviews, we're trying to get information on them to figure out what would be helpful for them, but then to go back and apply the information we find to actual experiences that they've had, and maybe we just have to ask them while we're teaching them, can you think of an experience that this would actually apply to in your life, or whatever it may be. But I think that would definitely help in our case where we're teaching these individuals.
I know that got talked about a little bit in chapter 4 too. It said like to try and have your participants find an example in their life of the principle that you're teaching. So yeah, just asking them, can you think of an example in your life would really help.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's perfect because that goes along with the formula that they were talking about in the beginning of the chapter, where they say that a formula for teaching basically a good lesson is, I'm just looking at it, is relevance, respect, and participation. And that's like Morgan and Shay, exactly what you guys were saying, is we just make it relevant. And I think by making it relevant and talking with them, you're you're establishing respect with them as well, because I think a lot of times in lessons it's easy to start talking down to someone and you don't even realize you're doing it. It's just because you feel you have the information to give them. But so that I think it's good because it cultivates a respect, and then also obviously it forces them to participate because it's actually relevant to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's this part I liked where it talked about how people like small surprises but not get shocked. And so I was thinking, that makes sense too, because when you're teaching, if you say something way crazy, you might not, you can't connect really well with the person you're teaching, and if you or they might not even agree with what you're saying. So if you do it more subtle, you can ease them into something, the ultimate outcome that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that too, because I don't know with you guys, but I get on a tangent a lot and I start talking about something that I think is this great idea and then nobody follows me. So I think there's also another fine line between giving too much information that's not relevant and kind of boring, and then also giving too much of your own opinion on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I really liked from chapter 5 was when it talked about involving others in a discussion, and when you're talking about information that's relevant, it made me think of that you need to be excited about the material yourself. Like our first lesson is going to be about stress, and I'm really excited to teach her because I've tried some of the techniques that we're going to talk about to relieve stress, and I know that they work. But if I didn't really care, I feel like the lesson would be really boring, and I feel like she wouldn't really take what we were saying. And so I think you need to really be excited about the information, and you don't have to love the information, but just be excited that they're going to be learning and that hopefully you're going to be helping them with the information that you're giving them as well.
You can go.
I was going to say, just another thing kind of with that too is just enjoy the material. Well, try your best to enjoy the material, and also try your best to enjoy the participant too, and what they have to say.
Yeah.
I know I talked about that of just enjoying the students or whatever, but just, there are participants there, but sorry, Michelle, was that you?
No, you're fine. I just was wondering, because on that note, Shay and I are going to be teaching about grief, and so maybe Shay probably knows the answer to this better than I do. I just don't know how. I don't want to be excited about grief, there's a certain tone of appropriateness that you need to have, how do I don't know, how do I get engaged in that without being inappropriate?
I don't think you have to be so excited as you're like, okay, we're going to talk about grief and it's just going to be so much fun and you're just going to love it, because I think you're right, that's very inappropriate. But I think just being excited, maybe more like a better word, just being motivated by your topic and realizing that it's going to help the participant and trying to make it as interesting as possible. And some topics you can be, I guess, more excited about, but then obviously some topics you need to have a more appropriate tone with as well.
I think for me too, Michelle, like since it is grief, I'm trying to take it as well. I know she's been, but I'm like, well, I want it this kind of serious, and I want to learn about these steps because I know I'm gonna go through it one day too, and so I don't know. I guess not super like excited about the topic, but just like an interest, taking an interest in the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Also, just on that, I would think if you can't relate to it, I wouldn't even like try to, do you know what I mean? Because when
You don't want
people
to be
suffer through that, they know if you've gone through that or not. So I just think it's better to be sincere, but not, I don't know,
You don't
not
want to
fake
be
about it, I guess, you know what I mean? Because they're already in a fragile position.
Yeah.
So I guess that would just go along with like watching your tone and certain words and sounding animated so you're not a robot, but also not jumping out of your seat to deliver this information.
Yeah.
I think just having sympathy, I mean, for our topic too, like sympathy with her would help.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's okay to admit, like, you know, I haven't suffered a loss of, you know, of a parent or someone like close to me, and so I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but you know, this is what, you know, these are some ways that might help with what you're feeling, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like with any of our lessons, like we're not. I mean, everyone's unique in their situations and what they want to learn, and so we're not going to be experts on that, and they have their own experience to draw from. But as long as we tell them, you know, we feel like we're really trying our best to teach you what we feel like might be helpful, and we're not saying you have to apply it to your life, but we hope that you can take something away from this that will help you in some way or another, you know.
Yeah.
I think if we approach it in a way that we're not trying to force them to use this, we just hope that it will help them, then I think they're not going to look at it and say, oh, well, you have no idea because you don't know what I'm experiencing. They'll look at it more like, oh, thanks for the effort that you put into it, you know.
Yeah.
There's also there's that 6 steps, and the one talks about like reframing their problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just put it in a more positive way. So maybe that's for anybody. So just think of a way that we could turn it into something good. Just like if anyone's suffering anything, you could always turn it into a positive thing. So.
Mm-hmm. You have anything else for chapter 5?
No.
Do you want to do the CES handbook next, or do you guys want to go through the chapters first?
We could break it up a little bit.
Okay.
Could be nice.
I liked reading through the handbook because I feel like teaching like teenagers at church is really hard for me. So this was like really helpful. But also, you know, it obviously applies to other things than religious, you know, teaching at church. But it just gave me a lot of pointers.
I think it's interesting when it talks about teaching with the Holy Ghost. I was trying to think about, you know, if we're teaching someone who's non-LDS, you know, in our careers, how the Holy Ghost could help them. But remember that the Holy Ghost really just kind of testifies of truth, and when they're hearing true principles, something's going to ring true. Whether, you know, we won't be talking about gospel-related things, but when it comes to research and things that can really help better their families, I think the Holy Ghost can still be there because they all have the Spirit of Christ with them and will help them feel better about what they're learning.
That's interesting because, you know, we had to research like scholarly resources, and they have to be true. So, and if the Holy Ghost testifies the truth, they will understand and have that feeling.
Yeah.
And I like where it said the Holy Ghost can help you remember things, like bring things back to your remembrance, and also help you, what did it say? Enhance a person's skills, which is comforting because I don't know if you guys feel really comfortable with teaching, but I don't. So I think that's something that will give me more confidence, you know, if I try to teach with the Spirit, not necessarily like from a gospel perspective, but even if I was teaching somebody who wasn't religious at all, if I felt like I had the Spirit with me, then the Spirit would help me be a better teacher, just in general.
When I about that, like with the Holy Ghost, it, like, I guess in a church stance too, of like when you prepare a lesson, sometimes you gather all this information, but not necessarily sometimes you come across another quote or something that you read during the day. I mean, or even from way back when or whatever. And sometimes in the lesson you don't have that, I guess, in there, like set in stone you're going to use. But say somebody says something, and for me, I just think of like what a Holy Ghost can influence me to say, recall on some of the information I did gather before and I didn't end up using, or something in the past that I heard, or a quote or something, and just like, or just pulling up like scriptures. I think when you study it out and you ask for the Holy Ghost to be there, that He is going to help you. Those things that you have studied previously or whatever, He can direct you to those things and remember things when you're teaching. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about who you're going to be teaching? I just mean in general for your career, because I anticipate teaching a lot of people who are not religious. So what do you guys think? I don't know. Does that even make sense?
Yeah. That kind of goes back to what Katie said. Like, I remember one of my classes last semester, I don't remember who it was, but I read a talk by somebody, I don't know if you guys have taken the family, um, well, I just forgot the name of it. The family advocacy class.
Yes.
Anyway, how we we'll be teaching, we'll be defending the family, but a lot of the time, most of the time, we're not going to be talking to people that believe, our same point of view. But as long as we have the Spirit with us, we'll be able to teach true principles, and if they're open to learning, they will understand the truth, no matter if they are religious or not, because it's the truth, and they'll understand it. So, I mean, that's basically what Katie said, but I think that applies to any teaching situation we'll be in. Like, as long as we really strive to teach what we know is beneficial for people and families, then I think if they're receptive to it, they'll learn.
So what about those articles and those the research that's out there that talks about counterpoints, like, if you are defending the family or you're teaching a lesson about the importance of family, and then there's articles out there backing up the fact that families don't have to be a blood-related unit. They can be, a friend, whatever. How do you combat those scholarly sources if somebody tries to challenge you with it?
Mm-hmm. I think you just have to be educated, like on each aspect. So you have to be prepared for what people are going to come at you for, like the negative part of what your argument would be, because then you would have something to say. If you're not really prepared for that and ready for what they're going to say, that why your argument is wrong, then they're ultimately going to think that they're going to win, because you don't really know what you're talking about, because you didn't even know that people were out there saying that families weren't necessary. You know what I mean? Like, we just have we have to have knowledge on every aspect of the argument, not just our own.
But I think also, because I'm taking that advocacy class right now, and you know how she talks about how you can't even use religion in it. So you have to make sure you have evidence for them that they will relate to, because they already most likely will not have a religious view at all or even care about it, and they'll just attack you because you're like, oh no, that's not right, because I don't believe that. So.
And so I think a lot of times it can be taken, like, I don't know, in different arguments or different things like that, even though you might not try to, but I think your personal belief would come out. Like, or they attack your personal beliefs, and we believe that families are important, and we can believe that. I don't know. I think sometimes it comes down to, like, you're gonna agree to disagree on things. Like, I don't know. I had a chemistry teacher in high school, and he did not like Mormons at all, and so he would always try to attack, like, my beliefs on things, and I'm like, okay, you have no other evidence behind this other than that you just don't like what I believe. And so it came to the point, it's like, you need to respect what I believe, and I respect what you believe. Don't try and attack on, I don't know. There needs to be some evidence behind something, instead of just like, well, I don't like what you believe, or I don't believe it's not true.
Yeah, some people, I mean, like, even us as Mormons, we're not going to budge our thoughts, Like, this is what we believe in, so we kind of we have to respect what they believe, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There has to be that mutual respect. I think, like, I mean, depending on what you are I guess for the advocacy class, you are kind of you're defending the family and trying to let people know. So never, I was going to say sometimes it's not like you're trying to change their mind. Don't try to come off that you're trying to change their mind. I think if you come off as, I'm here to give you the best information that I know, and you can kind of do what you want with it, or, you know, this is what I believe, they might be more receptive to it instead of just like coming out, you're wrong, you believe, you know, what you believe is wrong. Or there's a way to approach it that makes people more receptive to things.
All right, you guys ready to move on to chapter 6?
Yeah.
I had a hard time like applying this chapter to what we're doing right now just because it's individual teaching. So I mean, I think they had great ideas, but I felt like it's hard to apply. Most of it was hard to apply to what we're doing now just because it's kind of one-on-one. But I can see how they would be beneficial in like a group setting, like for people that are doing the
workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the fishbowl or the buzz
Oh yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, that's a good idea, but we can't use it.
Yeah.
I think the thing that just stuck out to me in that chapter was reading the group discussions in a second of it, and just how it gets people involved in the learning process, and then how it, like, I don't know, when you discuss things, then you're able to like talk through them, and then sometimes it makes more sense. So that's like just having a discussion with the person you're teaching is going to help them make more sense of things instead of them just listening to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
We could use role playing though too in our teaching.
Wait, can you say that again?
Is it like, because I know there's a lot of things that wouldn't work for how we're teaching, but like there's role playing and I mean television stuff like that we can use that would be beneficial.
Yeah. How do you guys think you would do? How would you apply a personal narrative? Like, I don't know. I haven't found a way that I feel comfortable telling stories about my experience because I don't want the person to think I'm just talking about myself. You know?
Well,
I think go ahead.
right. Okay. In the chapter under personal narrative, on that first line, it says that it can be stories from one's own life and from the lives of others. So if you don't feel comfortable talking about yourself, or you don't want it to sound self-centered, you can definitely just use a sibling, a relative, or some other person that you've had the interaction with, I think.
And then just not on it like, you know, you can tell a story with so many details, and sometimes we can add more details in there that aren't really necessary. So I'm sticking to just like what's necessary for the details, and then focusing on after just kind of like, oh well, you know, I have this experience, and this is what it was, and this is kind of what it taught me. And then maybe saying, oh, do you have an experience like that or something, instead of dragging on yours. So it's not so focused on you trying to switch it and like, I gave you something about me, now it's your turn to give you know, tell me something about you.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And maybe even saying something, you could say, I've been through something very similar because of, and then just share maybe like one or two sentences, kind of like what Shay was saying, just share like one or two sentences of what you went through. So that way they understand, like, I know where I can kind of see where you're coming from in that way. So it helps kind of build trust. Obviously, you don't want to lie if you don't have a story. Probably shouldn't say anything, but, when you have a story, just making it as, I think, as brief as possible. Can help build trust with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of hard though because you can't relate because our person has kids, but I don't have kids, but Morgan has kids, and like Shay and Michelle, they have grief or what they don't know, it's kind of, you don't know how to relate sometimes, so, and then that'll probably happen more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when you have to start getting creative because you might not relate to everything, but you can find ways that you sort of relate or similar kind of emotions. So it's not just like, oh, I don't relate to you, I don't understand you. It's like, I've never been through that personal experience, but I've felt this on a small scale or, had some kind of interaction like that.
I think we have to do that, like, especially if it's going to be our career, because every experience are we going to be able to relate to, like, that would just be insane if we could, I don't know, that's what Christ did, and we're not Christ, so there's no way we're going to be able to understand all of what they feel, but trying to and sympathizing with them, I think, would help.
So what did you guys think about the section on role playing? Like, do you think that's effective?
I've used role playing before in one of their classes, and I feel like it can be very effective depending on who your people are. Like, you kind of have to know who your participants are, because if they're just like, I mean, if they're more than willing to get up and actually step into the role that's given them to out or whatever, then it's gonna make a good experience. But if it's just kind of like, oh well, shy, and they're just gonna get and read the paper, and I don't know. I think depending on the qualities of the people you teach, it can be very beneficial or so much. So I've had it go both ways. But I think you can play a part in it too. Like, if you're playing with them, then how you are, how you're acting, if you're kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this role play, but then if you get into the role, then it makes them more likely to get into the role too.
Or, you could do like, not make everyone do it, but we can't, obviously we can't do it, oh, I don't know, maybe we could, but like ask for volunteers to do it, then they'll actually be involved, like want to actively learn. So, because if you just like assign people, like Shay said, sometimes they won't even care, or too shy, or just don't know what to do.
So I think asking volunteers is definitely way better, but it's like, well, we have one person. How?
Yeah, I know. You can't really ask, but
you have to
like a workshop.
I mean, because there's some people that, like, I know that I could just be like, hey, can you do this part for me or whatever, and they just, and they, step in and do the best that they could, and it'd be great. Where others, I know it's like, no, they would not be comfortable with it, so you have to fill it out.
Mm-hmm.
maybe like since I know it's kind of hard since we only have one participant, but like evaluating the first lesson and then see how you interact with her, like, and then you could find other activities or something. Maybe like, oh, maybe this will work for her or something like that the next time, because the first one might be, well, probably be a little rocky, I guess.
Well, and some of it's just gonna be like in order to know, you just kind of gotta try it, and then you know if it works or not for the next time. You know.
And I think it works best if they're having, especially in our position, if the participant is having a conflict with like someone else, like let's say their spouse, they could put themselves in their spouse's shoes, and like we as the teachers just pretend to be our participant or whatever after, because we know our participant better than we know their spouse, and so that puts them in their position of their spouse, and they can kind of see how their spouse is feeling, and they would know how their spouse would react to them, maybe saying certain things. And it can help them when they're trying to either confront a problem or, whoever it may be. And so I think it just depends on the situation of the participant.
Yeah, because that worries me too, just because I know if someone's hurt or they perceive someone to be a certain way, when they jump into that role, they're going to exaggerate it. They're going to be, and they're not going to be able to see what they're doing wrong in that situation.
Yeah.
That's where I think with role playing, like, it's always best to give them the opposite end of the scenario of what they are. Or if you try to put it into different terms, like instead of it's a husband and spouse or something, it could be a brother and sister or friends or little kids that go through it, just so they don't feel like it's totally all about them. I don't know. I feel like if you use the exact same scenario, like, okay, let's role play your scenario out. With some people that'd be great, but then with others, like, oh, are you attacking me? And it might not turn out as well. So sometimes just totally having the same kind of idea, so they learn what you want them to learn out of the role play, but not using their scenario. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of on that note, how do you guys feel about games?
I feel like it's easier in person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
what?
Do you think it's effective for adults?
I think depending on the game. I mean, I did a game one time. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of things that I've done. We were teaching about kids' emotions, and so how sometimes teaching your kids about how to express different emotions, and so we had them in a circle. It was like a cakewalk kind of thing, but you land on the emotion and try and notice it. And so for the kid, I mean, it was a game, but we tried to get the parents thinking of like, how do you express this? Like, because sometimes it's in the heat of the moment, it's freaking out or whatever, and you need to try and teach them about their emotions. And so you're like, well, this is how we express this if we're sad, or something. And so, I don't know. It can be beneficial, but they're kind of hard to put together and actually make them, beneficial, from my experience at least. But
I kind of think it depends on the audience too, like who's coming, and I guess and then as family relations, you're only going to interact with one person, so how can you? It's kind of hard to like play a game with one person. I mean, I guess it could work. I mean, there's a bunch of games you can play, but if you really think about it, but it's if they want to be involved in the game or not, or
I think playing the game with them might be better. Like like from what we did teaching, as I looked back on it, I was like, I wish I would have been in the circle with them playing the game, because I think it would have made them get more excited and kind of have an example of what we were trying to do out of the game, so it made it more clear.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're willing to participate and jump in and kind of, some games that look silly or whatever, then it makes your participants more willing to do the same, and then they're more like, I feel like they accept you too more, like instead of like, oh well, she's the teacher and she's too high above it, like if you're making yourself at their same level.
Alright, you guys ready to move to chapter 7?
Yeah. I like in chapter 7 that talked about you need to be sensitive to differences that people are going to have, because they're all going to have different experiences, which is going to give them a certain bias. And as a family life educator, we need to be aware of those biases as we're teaching our participants. Whether they're members of the church or not, that helps us gives us what their outlook is on life, so we can not be offended if they say certain things, or whatever it may be, just respecting them because they deserve that.
I think it's important to understand like their culture and where they come from. Like the lady that we're teaching, she's from Brazil, and so I know like in different countries and different things, you grow up differently. You have different ideas of what's normal, and so just being sensitive to those things and being accepting of them, like I guess opening your eyes to like there's more than one way to do things, or there's more. I mean, it doesn't have to be, the right way isn't exactly what you were taught growing up. Other people have the same kind of things. I don't know, I think especially just dealing with a wide variety of cultures and stuff, that we have to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
How do you guys plan on learning about different cultures? Because I'm lucky, my husband's from Bolivia, but he's half Brazilian, and so I'm really familiar with how their family works, kind of their religious beliefs and things like that. But in other cultures, I have no idea, and I don't know how to learn that. What would you guys do to find out that information?
Sometimes I just like ask them, what was your experience growing up? And I mean, just try to get a feel for things. I mean, you can always look stuff up online, but I feel like every person still, even though they might be from a different culture or place, they're going to have different experiences than exactly what's online or whatever. But just asking them about their experiences and really taking an interest in it. And I feel like if I was like a counselor or somebody that was going to do this for years, then I'd take the time for it, like in the beginning, kind of like our intake summary, and really get to know them. And just kind of, you can kind of feel out how they see things, or how they were raised. Kind of tells you, well, this is kind of, maybe how they think or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think if you do like research online, you kind of have to be careful where you get your information from, because I think a lot of things are just people's opinions and not really true for the whole culture. You know what I'm saying?
That's why I think it'd be better to just like go to the source themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can Google Mormons and there's probably different stuff that comes up that isn't true, but
yeah.
Yeah, even like within the same race, you didn't grow up the same as someone else the same way. So
So if we're in a group environment, let's say like a small group environment, but the majority of those people are from one culture, do you have a generalized lesson, or do you try to talk about both cultures? Like how do you balance that?
I think you need to just focus on the research and like the just start with like a more generalized outline and lesson. Because if you believe your research is going to be helping everyone, no matter what their culture, hopefully it will. And then when they bring up concerns and they have questions, I think that's when you can start researching it more based on their culture and things like that. But I think for like a first type of lesson where there's a group, making just like a generalized outline, I think would be better.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe generalizing it, and then as it goes on and as they have questions, just kind of knowing about their culture, you can answer those in ways that would pertain like to them, or to both. I wouldn't just say, well, this is how people from Brazil are going to handle it, and we're not going to even address. I would, if you have a group of many different, I would address all the different ways. I wouldn't address just one on one culture.
plus I think, like in our communication classes, you're trying to focus on the target audience. So maybe it's not necessarily the culture, but they all have like the same issue. So when you're focusing on the issue, that's what's more important, and then you can add on to the culture.
Yeah, and hopefully you're teaching more principles and not so much like application, so they can just take those principles and apply it to their own personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did like is when it talks about don't waste any time. So, just making sure you're on point with everything and not, because a lot of times if you're in class and the teacher's not doing something, your mind's going to wander and think of something else. So it's important to keep the rhythm going. So I guess that's why it's good that we're practicing the transitions so we're not wasting time.
Yeah.
I also liked where it talked about skilled dialogue, and it said we need the knowledge of our participants as much as they need the knowledge that we have. I think as long as we keep that perspective, I don't know, I think it will help us as teachers, like just knowing that they have an experience that we can learn from, as we discuss, then we're not only teaching, but we're also learning at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like in that section how it also talks about having humility. I think that's the only way that you can actually learn and teach at the same time. And they're going to be able to tell how humble you actually are, or if you're condescending, or, if you think you know everything, they're going to be able to pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, oh, sorry, was someone going to go?
No, I was just going to say, do we have anything else? Did you have a comment?
Yes. On that part that says know your audience, I just don't know what to even think about it, because it's like we just talked about cultural diversity and how everyone comes from different backgrounds, and on top of that they have different cultures. How do you know your audience ever?
I think like
I
if
think
you're,
just,
oh, you can go, Shay.
no, you can go. Go ahead.
Oh. I think if you're living in an area, you know the area and you know what the people are going through, and there's still going to be rich people and poor people, and everyone's going to be going through different things, but you know the type of mindset that is happening in that area. I think having people from different cultures, like outside of the United States, is gonna, or where they don't have a mindset like the United States, I think is gonna be more rare than it's going to be common because they're living in the United States. So even though they have the background of their culture, they're also going to have, they're going to have lived in the United States. They know, what the culture is here as well. And so I think just like knowing your audience, just knowing, where these people come from, and maybe even trying to like give them a questionnaire the first time if you're in a big group setting, and like looking through those and things like that, trying to get to know them might help.
For that section in my notes, I said that like just understanding the audience in the context of their surroundings, so just kind of where they come from and stuff, and then being sensitive to the unique construction of meaning for each participant. So I think just kind of, I don't know, we're not going to know everything about every the group of people or whatever, but just trying to be sensitive to how they think of things, and I mean you can kind of get more insight of just paying attention to their body language or how they respond to different things. Like, oh, okay, maybe that's a touchy subject or not, or they really get excited about this, and just, I don't know. I think it's a learning as you go kind of thing too. Like it said in there to explore your limits and kind of, to be flexible and comfortable with diversity, but don't overstep your line either.
All right. Anyone else? Last comment or two? No? Okay. So I guess what I'll do is I'll stop this, and then Katie can go, and then we can just do our pilot lesson, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Work?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, good luck, guys.
Bye.